Tonight, we turn our attention to a vast expanse of saltwater in northeastern Canada. A body of water with a history as deep and cold as its own depths, Hudson Bay. Its story is not just one of geography, but a somber tale of ambition, conflict, hardship, and profound cultural shifts that have left an indelible mark on the land and its people. This is the story of Hudson Bay, a saga written in ice, blood, and tears. The bay was formed by retreating glaciers over thousands of years, a colossal inland sea connected to both the Atlantic and Arctic Oceans. For millennia before European eyes ever gazed upon its icy shores, this region was home to various indigenous peoples, including the Inuit in the north and Cree in the south. They lived in harmony with the harsh environment, their lives intricately woven into the rhythms of the seasons, the migration of caribou, and the patterns of the ice. Theirs was a world of profound spiritual connection to the land, a world that was about to be irrevocably altered. The early 17th century heralded the arrival of European explorers. Driven by the relentless quest for the fabled Northwest Passage to Asia, in 1610, the English navigator Henry Hudson sailed his ship, the Discovery, into the bay. But what began as a journey of exploration quickly descended into a tragedy of human desperation. Trapped by the encroaching winter ice in James Bay, Hudson's crew faced a brutal season of starvation and sickness. Come spring, a mutiny erupted. Hudson, his young son, and 7 loyal crewmen were cast adrift in a small boat, abandoned to the unforgiving waters of the very bay that now bears his name. They were never seen again, a haunting prelude to the hardships that would define the region's European history. The real turning point, however, came 50 years later. 2 French coureurs des bois, Radisson and des Gros Saliers, learned from indigenous communities about the vast wealth of furs in the lands surrounding the bay. When the French crown dismissed their findings, they took their proposal to England. This led to the creation of the Hudson's Bay Company in 1670. A corporate entity granted a royal charter by King Charles II. This charter gave the company a staggering monopoly over all trade in the lands whose rivers and streams drained into Hudson Bay. This territory, named Rupert's Land, was an empire in itself, covering nearly 40% of what is now Canada. Thus began the fur trade era, a period of intense economic exploitation. The Hudson's Bay Company, or HBC, established forts and trading posts along the bay's coast, lonely outposts like York Factory and Fort Churchill. These were not just centers of commerce, they were symbols of a new power dynamic. Indigenous peoples, who had been self-sufficient for generations, were drawn into a complex and often devastating global economy. They traded beaver pelts and other furs for European goods like guns, metal tools, blankets, and alcohol. This new system had a profoundly disruptive effect on indigenous societies. The demand for furs fueled intense competition and conflict between different First Nations. Traditional territories were contested, and ancient rivalries were inflamed by the new economic pressures. The introduction of European diseases like smallpox and measles, for which indigenous populations had no immunity, swept through communities with catastrophic results, wiping out entire villages and erasing generations of knowledge and culture. The social fabric, once woven from kinship and tradition, began to fray under the strain of dependency and loss. This wasn't just trade, it was a slow, painful transformation of a way of life. The history of the bay was also one of military conflict. The vast wealth of the fur trade made the region a battleground for imperial ambitions. For decades, England and France fought for control of the bay's strategic trading posts. Forts were captured and recaptured in a series of naval and land skirmishes. The Battle of the Bay in 1697 saw a single French warship, the Pelican, defeat 3 English vessels in a dramatic and bloody naval engagement, securing temporary French dominance. These distant colonial wars had very real and tragic consequences for those living and working in the harsh northern climate. Life for the European employees of the HBC, known as baymen, was one of extreme isolation and hardship. They were overwhelmingly men, living in cramped, cold forts, enduring monotonous diets, brutal winters, and the constant threat of scurvy. Their lives were governed by the strict hierarchy of the company, their days dictated by the rhythms of the trade. They were far from home, living on the edge of a vast, untamed wilderness, their stories often ending in lonely, unmarked graves. The bay demanded a heavy price from all who sought to tame it. As the centuries passed, the fur trade began to wane. Fashion trends in Europe shifted, and the beaver hat fell out of style. The monopoly of the Hudson's Bay Company was challenged. And in 1870, Rupert's Land was sold to the newly formed Dominion of Canada. This was a monumental transfer of land, done with little to no consultation with the indigenous peoples who had inhabited it for thousands of years. They found themselves subjects of a new government, their lands and rights suddenly redefined by distant politicians. The treaties that followed, intended to formalize relationships, often resulted in further loss of land and autonomy, confining peoples to reserves and ushering in the dark era of residential schools, a policy of forced assimilation that inflicted deep intergenerational trauma. Today, the story of Hudson Bay continues, but the narrative is changing. The legacy of the fur trade and colonial expansion is a scar on the land and its people. The once thriving trading posts are now historical sites, silent witnesses to a bygone era. The descendants of the Cree, Inuit, and other First Nations are reclaiming their history, their language, and their sovereignty. They are at the forefront of a new struggle, one against the modern threat of climate change. The ice that once trapped Henry Hudson is now disappearing at an alarming rate. Hudson Bay is warming faster than other parts of the world, profoundly affecting the delicate Arctic ecosystem. The polar bears, who depend on the sea ice to hunt seals, are facing starvation. The entire food web, from plankton to whales, is being disrupted. This environmental crisis is also a human crisis for the indigenous communities whose culture and food security are inextricably linked to the health of the bay. The sad echoes of history are heard once more as external forces beyond their control threaten their way of life yet again. The history of Hudson Bay is a microcosm of the broader North American story. It is a tale of discovery that led to tragedy, of commerce that led to cultural devastation, and of a beautiful, wild place that has borne witness to the best and worst of human nature. As we look at this great northern sea today, we see not just a geographical feature, but a repository of memories of ancient traditions, of desperate struggles, of profound loss, and of enduring resilience. It serves as a somber reminder of the cost of empire and a pressing call to action to protect its fragile future. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into the histories that have shaped our world.